Chaos is the operation that allows for the spontaneous order within the light sphere, or to at least keep things narrowed down to our perspective, this density. Whether you agree with the perspective on light and how it binds together this universe, we do need to understand that the burgeoning theory of electromagnetics is at least more accurate than what we're told when it comes to inertia and gravity. Inertia and gravity are a false concept. And really, by the end of his career, even Newton was admitting this. You know, Newton just put into mathematical linguistics what all the schmucks he was interacting with couldn't put together. Right? They couldn't figure out how to say it, and he goes, oh, you say it like this, and everybody went, he's a genius. No, he just understood the language they were speaking and how to express it based on their methodology. The electromagnetic universe requires a constant exchange of charges and polarities. So in the breast of the electric universe, or the competing magnetic universe, we have two concepts that basically can't understand. They are one and the same. They are inseparable. But they allow for what the Greeks told us all things come from and how they operate. And that's chaos. All things came from chaos. Now, our mainstream science fields, especially in physicists' worlds, have some serious discrepancies in their concepts against these old myths, and they try to argue against them. The Cosmos with Neil Tyson deGrasse is a fantastic example of this. He goes on air and tells us that the Greeks told us Orion is up in the stars, constantly chasing after the Pleiades. But that doesn't really tell us anything, he says. They go through this big spiel, basically getting to the point where, by the end, Neil Tyson deGrasse tells us, as we see, the Pleiades will eventually be swallowed by the black hole at the center of the galaxy, and Orion will never reach them. To which I saw this episode and went, but that's exactly what the Greeks said, you schmuck. I think he's a nice man, I do, but that's really a disingenuous attitude, isn't it? Just to feel smart in your generation, just to feed your ego, just to make a name for at least your mentors, if not yourself, you deny the basics. You have to reterm chronically the basics. And the basics are everything spontaneously orders and must be left free. For when it is forced into containment, it breaks down. It self-destructs. So we find that chaos is the preeminent order. If we were to compare, and let me start in this comparison by pointing out that I am not necessarily saying that this form of chaos lines up with what we call chaos theory. And when you do research on chaos theory, quite frankly, there's not a lot on it. It's very sparse and minimal. There's definitely information on it, and it has a concept to it. But we're going to philosophically look at it more so. We're not going to worry about any mathematics behind it, because at the end of the day, mathematics is just a language. But as a philosophy, we can compare it with a much more human concept, and we can compare it with another philosophy, which is very interesting because if you listen to people in the philosophy of anarchy discuss things, they try to describe anarchy as chaos, and that doesn't work. Anarchy really aligns more with Max Stirner egotist anarchy. And Max Stirner's egotist anarchy was very visibly prevalent and present in the late 70s into the 80s. And as I grew up as a young kid, I'd see these anarchist punkers, and even when I was in school, there were still some running around. And I talk now, as a man who's going into his 40s, I've still talked with college students. I had to watch a bunch of anarcho-capitalists be manhandled by a young black girl who had been an anarchist. And she was like, you guys are full of crap. Anarchy means you take whatever you want. And if somebody wants to take you as a female, you just give yourself up to them. And that really is a heavy mindset in that culture. Basically, if somebody wants to give themselves up to you, or you're much bigger and stronger and they can't fight back, they should submit, and you can take whatever you can take. And the fact is, that is anarchy. People who have no rule over them but establish all the rules under them, and have rules that they choose to live by but they don't have to follow. Some think that that's chaos, but when chaos is the rule across the board, everything does have to follow the rule of chaos. So I'm going to use anarchy as a concept of forced control, and we don't see that in the universe. We see things get locked into things, we see orbits, but we also see a constant and chronic exchange of these things, of these particles. Those particles can be what people are theorizing in quantum mechanics, or they can be planets. Nothing is really as fixed as we think. It's ever changing, and if you cannot adapt to that ever changing mode of the electromagnetic field, you disintegrate. And anarchy has a big habit of this. An egotist anarchist will basically have a box, pull as much as it can into the box, and leave everything within its grasp and its power that will give itself to it, and it closes up the box. And that's its box and its stuff, and it's in there with it. But the flaw in its concept is that it can never keep chaos out of the box. And once chaos is in the box, which it always is, eventually the anarchist sees this, and what the anarchist does is then deny it. The mode or the operation of chaos continues to taunt the anarchy. And it basically informs the anarchy pretty quickly that this is a cute little box that you have, but I want out. And the anarchist or the anarchy concept will do whatever it can to hold everything in the box till chaos basically stretches from within the box, while simultaneously pulling the box from its edges, ripping the box apart. And everything that was taken and encapsulated and emplaced under a forced concept is relieved and released. And just right there, I have expressed to you everything comes from chaos. Boosh! The box is ripped open, everything flies all over the place, right? Passions, the waters, the earths, the fires, the skies, the oceans, all that stuff. Propagation. And in that process, we will later on discuss in another video the operation of procreation, which is one of the things that come out of chaos, procreation. This is the operation by which the static field is chronically sharing itself and chronically expanding itself. If you want proof of this, if you need to see this, find an analog TV or an analog radio and turn it on. They have programs online you can go look at, static readings, but I don't trust the digital outputs and inputs. I would want an analog signal reader. And if you use an old radio or you use an old TV, you will both hear and see this. And personally, my perception is that when you turn on a TV and you see static, you are seeing your second dimension. You're seeing it. It's not artificial with all the images that we're showing. You're seeing the static field live, and you're seeing a transfer of information. And yet in that process, it's not moving. And that, I can't think of a better expression and representation of chaos than a real static field. And when you have this conversation with people to a point, they kind of get locked into the one of two concepts of static. They either think of something that's in one place, never moving, and to which their argument is the universe is always moving, and so it's not static. But they're missing the fact that none of the atomic structures, or even to get smaller, the quantum structures, really move. And I'll point back to the last video on light, or my first video, because this is only the second. My first video on light, and you'll go back and you can start to comprehend this in the light spectrum and even electromagnetic operation. Your core points are never moving. They're just passing the information along. That's what everyone keeps defining as wavelengths and waves, photonic waves. That's just the points of light passing the moving light, but those points don't move. Technically, an atom doesn't really move. It's never the same atom because it's passed along, but the point that passed it along is still there. So you have motionlessness with motion. So there's that other house where they think of static and they just think of what you got on TV, fuzziness, vaguity, indescribability. I don't want to say void. Too many people associate that with nothingness when it's really just indescribable. But when you think about electromagnetics, you never have to get to light, just think about electromagnetics. That's what really goes on there, is a constant, unmoving point exchanging charges with another unmoving point. They don't have to go anywhere, but they can have things around them and develop things around them they're exchanging. This is chaos. Through that exchange, they create some kind of an order. You're an order. You're a physical being with flesh and bone and a consciousness, and you can move around all you want. But you're ordered into that thing. This physical body is an order. It's always changing, and that's why we were taught this in ancient days. This is why the old observations, remember, they didn't have TVs. The only thing they had to do, and the most entertaining thing they had to do specifically, was to watch the stars at night. That was their grandest entertainment up until they became vicious and started slaughtering each other for sport. Which, I mean, listen, that's an extreme point. There was competition in sport, and we didn't always do that. That was usually the downfall of a society that was practicing anarchy. The cosmos practices chaos. The cosmos is always spontaneously ordering things out, and when those things become destructive to the process, the chaos automatically reorders it, shifts it around, and leaves it in a free state. And that's the important thing. We must begin to understand that we are living in a unified field that has tons of free parts, and it has to be allowed to operate that way. It has to be allowed to engage its operations in spontaneous order and chaotic fields, chaotic relations. It's just up to you how you want those to become stable in your life, with having the realization and the knowledge that it can change instantly beyond your control. And when that happens, you're going to have to accept it. When the ground opens up due to a massive earthquake and starts falling down into itself, you're going to need to run. You're not going to be able to go back to the house you had that the ground ate. You're going to have to run and establish a new stability somewhere else. If you cannot do that, I don't see how you can actually evolve or maintain. Feel free to share your opinions in the comments below. Address these statements as you will. And please be sure to subscribe to my page. Thank you very much.